Hello, and welcome to Season 7 of the FODcast, the podcast focused on the future of digital commerce hosted by Simply Commerce. Season 7 promises to continue to bring you some of the industry's brightest minds across the globe as we unpick the sector and where it's heading. From war stories to strategy and technology deep dives to future trends, we cover it all as we continue our journey to have one of the most popular podcasts in commerce. Before we start, if you enjoy our content, please do hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening on, like and share on socials. Hello, and welcome back to the FODcast, the future of all things digital commerce. Today, I'm very pleased to welcome Hilary Stephenson, Managing Director for Nexer Digital. Welcome, Hilary.
Hi, James. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on the show. So today, we are going to be talking about the importance of raising the bar in accessibility. Now, being completely honest, I'd never really thought about accessibility, and I'm sure I'm not alone. When Hilary and I first spoke, we discussed some really interesting areas around accessibility, who's doing it well, what we can learn, and a hell of a lot more. And today, we're going to talk about these in a lot more detail. Before we start, Hilary, do you want to give the audience a little bit of an intro into your background and to Nexer Digital?
I can do, yeah. So I'm Hilary. I'm the Managing Director and founder of Nexer Digital. We are part of a larger Swedish IT consulting company, but I obviously lead the Nexer Digital team in the UK. We've been doing that for about 18 years, so we've been around the block a few times. Our main focus is, we're an agency, so we build and design products and services, and we do that with a very sharp focus on digital inclusion and social impact. Kind of shapes where we choose to do our work.
And it's such an important area as well. I'm really looking forward to deep diving into this one today.
Thank you.
So let's start things off just really quickly with talking about what does a good accessible customer experience look like?
Okay, so I would say anything that removes barriers for people, anything that allows people to interact with an app or a website or any kind of transactional service in the way that they need to, that it works for how they have configured their device, their phone. So anything that removes blockers from people having the same experience as the majority of users, which is where we typically focus design. But yeah, it means that sometimes it leaves people behind, it cuts people out.
Okay. And what is the most accessible experience that you've had personally, Hilary?
Oh gosh, I think about this. So, I don't like shopping. This is a great way to start asking about retail. But anything that I'm often pushed for time. I've got 2 kids. They often need things urgently. So anything that helps me browse, buy, and track seamlessly is wonderful. And I would like that to be the experience for everybody. Highlight at the weekend, I renewed my passport. That is a really good service. It's not a shopping service, but it's a really good example of how you can complete the full journey. Really good comms, really good follow-up. You know exactly where you are in the process, and it's just made easy for you. So, I think we're probably going to go on to talk a little bit about how kind of government services have influenced accessibility. But yeah, the passport renewal service is a good one.
Yeah, do you know what? It's not often where the government lead the way in something, right? Normally you find it's a few years behind, but actually, as you said, we're going to be talking about that in a bit more detail later on. But there's been a bit of change in the world of accessibility, hasn't there, in the last couple of years? So what's changed, and why are we talking about this now?
Yeah, so the changes in shopping, but also some of the legislation around digital services. So acts, the most recent one is the European Accessibility Act, came into force in June 2025. It was trialled and trailed before that, so people had plenty of time to prepare, but it's really kind of shaken up attitudes in the industry because people now have a real compliance driver. I think in the industry more broadly, there's more awareness of accessibility. It was really good that you said you didn't know about it, but we've had some good conversations already, right? And you can see that it just makes ultimate business sense as well as it being a kind of moral obligation. There's the new act that came in June. Prior to that, there was web accessibility directives. There was a public sector bodies accessibility regulation rules, PSBAR. So over the last 5 years, the sort of legal standards have been creeping in. Lawsuits have gone up in the US. The ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, has seen a rise in litigation. So I think it's just becoming a bit more front and center. I also think we've got a heightened experience and expectation around digital since the pandemic. People just expect to do a lot more online. So, why would we leave people out of that?
Yeah, and I'm looking at myself in particular. I think there's just, and I'm sure I'm not alone. Maybe I am, but there's just a naivety, I think, as well, that there are many out there. I think you've got some stats around this, about the amount of online users that have a form of the disability, but we have this naivety where everyone just has the same experience regardless. This is possibly going to sound quite bad, but I've not gone on a website before and wondered how someone else would use this website that has a disability. And I wonder if I'm alone in that thought process, or if actually that is something that is front and center when it comes to decision making within retail.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a malicious act to kind of deliberately design things to exclude people. It is, as you say, people just don't know. It's not always part of all education when people are coming into the sector. I think if you look at something like retail and commerce, you've got a lot of startups, fast-paced organization. You've got teams, churning resources all the time. So, the level of awareness maybe just isn't there in some sectors. You've also got in retail, very date-driven, very kind of seasonal, campaign-driven. You've got the kind of golden quarter of dates that everybody's rushing towards, and sometimes accessibility maybe just gets a little bit pushed down the list of priorities. For no bad reasons. It's just people maybe don't realize what they're doing by cutting people.
Yeah, and that's it. It's one of those areas where if you don't realize you're doing it, then you're never going to know. I mean, you obviously have these conversations on a regular basis, Hilary. So when you're speaking to customers, how often are you having to promote accessibility to them versus how many of them are coming to you that have accessibility at the forefront anyway?
Yeah, I mean, we bang the drum a lot, I think, and there are many of us out there. I mean, it's got quite a strong grassroots community vibe to it. I would say we tend to go with kind of the business reasons and the moral reasons rather than the compliance drivers. So, you touched on stats. You'll know this already because you're in the sector, but it's something like 62 million e-commerce users in the UK this year, and that's not just new shoppers, that's just spending growth as well. There's a lot of people buying online. I think the UK's largest in Europe, top 3 globally in terms of the e-commerce market. So it's a big business driver to do this. People with disabilities, there's a wonderful organisation called Purple. They run something called the Purple Pound, and there's also a date annually in November called Purple Tuesday, which highlights the missed opportunity. It highlights the money that people are losing. Now, I don't always think that it should all be about businesses missing out. I think people should go with the kind of moral reasons for doing it. But from a pure marketing perspective, it just makes total sense. They've estimated that it's something like 274 billion a year that UK disabled people and their families could spend and do spend. So, don't underestimate allies and families and friends in this. If they know people have had a bad experience, they will click elsewhere. And that cost of clicking away is not insignificant.
274 billion, and that's certainly not insignificant.
Billion pounds, and you roll it up and firing numbers at you. And this is just what we can count, right? Because hidden disabilities is an important thing. People's confidence in disclosing their disability is, it's their right. So, we're not entirely sure how many people we're talking about in terms of who could be reached or who are being locked out. But globally, it's $13 trillion in terms of spending power. It's not a small number.
No.
Yeah, and those people are spending. It's not that they can't spend everywhere, but they're choosing where they can spend based on whether or not things work.
Yeah, that's a huge figure. Yeah.
Massive. Yeah, I had to triple check it for you.
Okay, so that is an accurate figure as well. Triple checked, verified.
Accurate as we can count. I mean, even that one of the downsides of people being kind of overlooked as a group is we maybe haven't got the true statistics. And we did quite a lot of work across the UK and the Nordics, because we're part of a Nordic brand, and we deliver accessibility work in Sweden as well. They count it differently in different countries based on age, based on condition, based on consent. So it's actually quite hard to get a true number. I would pretty much guarantee that it's more than that there are more than 20% of the global population have some form of disability or neurodivergent need.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, there's a good chance it would be higher. Like you said, there's a lot of people that are reluctant to talk about the fact they have disabilities and what have you for one reason or another. So actually getting a very accurate figure is going to be extremely hard, but you can almost guarantee it will be higher than the number that you've mentioned.
And the other thing is, if you exclude people from your service, you're actually erasing them from the data. So like, if you're not capturing data on that disabled shopping experience, they're not included in the numbers anyway, right? So you don't actually know who you're leaving out because they've not been able to get past go. So yeah.
So a huge topic to discuss, but also a lot of opportunity for not just retail, but for any consumer-facing business that sells products or services online to increase their customer base and their audience, but also in turn increase their revenue as well, which we know is a hot topic for businesses right now. Margins are razor thin. Customer spending is slightly lower than many would like. So the last thing we want to be doing is dismissing a portion of the country that has would say 274 billion pounds spending potential behind it.
Yeah, and it's not just kind of the revenue. I mean, you're quite right. There's huge business imperatives for doing it, but brand reputation, referrals, people coming back. If the situation is such for disabled people that they have to pick and choose where they shop, they're going to return if they have a good experience. They're going to tell other people. And they're definitely not going to go back to places where they've had a negative experience. Because, that's harm. So reputation and people being aware that your brand takes this seriously is a really important thing as well.
Definitely. So we're going to come on to talking about retail in a little bit more detail, sort of where some gaps are and what can be done to make some really simple improvements to have a better experience. Before we do that, we touched upon earlier how government digital services are currently setting the bar. You spoke about your experience renewing your passport. I had an equally very positive experience at the end of last year. For me, it was the same when I did my driving license, and actually anything I do with the government, whether it be for childcare assistance or whatever it might be, is generally a fairly smooth process and very easy. Why is that?
Number of reasons. So I'm kind of showing my age a little bit, but I can remember the kind of early days of everything going online, and there was a lot of standards around, and there was a lot of good organisations out there doing it well. So local government used to be really strong on accessibility. There were awards dished out to people who were doing really well in the sector. I think things started to tail off a little bit when everybody rushed to mobile apps. So I think that the founding principles of the internet and the Web Standards Project, everything was set up for success for disabled people. There's a really good framework there, but I think as soon as we started to kind of play around with native mobile apps, marketing took over and things sort of kind of tailed off a little bit. But the government, and certainly central government, kept going. There's been a huge investment, government digital services, the gov.uk team, they have maintained that focus over the years. But, they have the added advantage of really good cross-sector teams working on this. So, there's a really good community working across government departments who share their knowledge, design patterns. They can build a design pattern so that most government website experiences look and feel the same. Maybe in the back end, there's still some kind of legacy systems and data creeping in, but on the whole, the immediate experience of a government service is the same, whether it's tax, whether it's passport, as you say, visas, anything like that, driving licenses. So they have the ability to reuse things that have been tried and tested with people. They've also set their own standards. So they have government service assessments. So the government service standard requires that things need to be tested with disabled people and need to be audited before they can pass into a live service. They work with assistive technologies as part of their process. They employ disabled people as part of, their teams. So they're just further ahead. They care about this. We run an event every year called Camp Digital. It has a huge amount of support from people from government teams, and they really do care and know about inclusive design and accessibility. So I just think they're further ahead. It's just the way we are. In terms of learning from them, the retail sector, we do see some positive signs. I think there's some myths in retail around accessibility. So people think maybe you can't have an engaging, interactive and accessible experience all in the one site. That's not true. Obviously, commerce and retail sites tend to be very creatively led because you've got brand images, you've got product images, you've got video, you've got models, you've got everything in the mix. And that kind of tends to lead the design approach rather than putting the foundations in place for accessibility from the start.
You said something there, government just cares. I mean, it wasn't those exact words, but that's ultimately what you said. Do you feel as though decision makers in retail don't care, or it's just not a priority for them? I mean, ultimately, it's very hard to have a one-size-fits-all approach, isn't it? And I guess the government has the luxury of, it doesn't matter how fancy their website is, you're going on that website because you have to do a specific task. You cannot renew your passport with anyone else other than the government. So it doesn't matter how standard that website is, you need to go on it and do it and to go from A to B as quickly as possible. Whereas you go on a fashion retail brand's website, for example, as you touched on, there's a big focus on the look, the feel, how quickly they can get the product into the basket and complete the checkout. And actually, they're probably just going to look at, okay, who's our primary target audience that spends the most money with us, and how can we maximize opportunity with them, knowing that they're never going to hit the whole country.
It's exactly that. I mean, marketing works on segmentation, right? If we know that 1 in 5 people in the UK have a disability, and we also know, well, it's about 20%, and we also know that 1 in 5 people are digitally excluded, marketeers are going to focus on the 4 out of 5 who aren't. Yeah, they're going to focus on where the majority is, and they're going to design around the needs of the majority. We try and flip the argument the other way and say, if you work with disabled people, you involve them, you employ them, you create opportunities for them to be part of the process, that enriches your design. You're going to get a much more varied insight into how people are interacting with your products, and that's going to help the majority by default. Yeah, if you get it right around more complex, more varied, richer needs, you're going to have a chance of hitting everybody with your solution. And by everybody, we're all aging. We all have kind of situational impairment. We might break a hand, break a leg, break a hand, break a wrist, break a leg, wear glasses. We're all kind of working with things that have been born out of accessibility without us even realizing it. Pinch and zoom, voice, assistance, transcripts, captions, they've all come out of the accessibility movement, and they all help the majority anyway. So if you design around all of those things, you're going to hit the whole market, and you're not going to exclude disabled people along the way. Just kind of makes sense to me, I think.
Yeah, just really quickly then, how easy is it to design around all of those areas that's just been discussed?
You've got to be open-minded to do it. You've got to have disabled people in the process. We have disabled people in our team. It's only going to make the products and services that you develop are only going to be better if your team is representative of the wider audience that's going to use them, right? So you want to get people involved in the process. We know factually that it costs more to fix accessibility once something has been built and launched than it does to involve and invest in it at the start. That's just statistically true in terms of projects and budgets. So you leave it to the end, you've got to unravel a load of stuff and patch things up, and quite often that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
If you bake it in at the start, you're going to have a better chance. So, research, usability testing, co-design, prototype testing, really working with people in the early stages before any lines of code are written to make sure that you know where you're going. Design systems, as I mentioned, working and reusing things that have been tested with people before. Realizing that maybe it isn't always done. You can't just do it and tick it off. It's, you're never going to make anything accessible for everybody. It's just not the case. So invest in it like you do with security, with sustainability, with DevOps. Make sure it's part of the process.
So I guess whenever you're adding something to the process, there's going to be the various considerations like time and cost that factor into it. Broadly speaking, if a business was to come to you and they wanted to have accessibility at the heart of everything that they did, what percentage increase are they likely to have to consider in terms of time and cost on top of the original conversation?
That is a really interesting question, and not one that I have ever quantified. But maybe that's something we could. But what I would say is it's less about the time at the start; it's more about the cost or the risk if you haven't done it. So we know what people are being fined. We do know what they're paying as a kind of sticking plaster at the end to kind of patch things up. If you involve people in the start, I would imagine the costs are actually quite low, because you're doing this before you're doing any technical architecture, before you're doing any real coding or building live services. You're doing this when you're looking at design, brand, color contrast, the choice of images, like all of those things. They're not costly. You just need to get them right at the start. You've got to have a good plan around your content. That's going to help everybody and every user anyway. So why wouldn't you do it? So I think then you're looking at training, but I believe all developers should know how to code things in an accessible way. So I think that's non-negotiable anyway. We work with quite a lot of UK Northwest institutions, educational establishments, where some of them are really good, and they're embedding this skill in young talent coming into the industry. But there are many more who, no idea, I think, doesn't even feature on their radar. So there's some stuff to do to educate people early, so they come into the industry already with a passion and an awareness that means you don't have that training cost on top.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting thing to consider, because I think more often than not, when it comes to decision making across businesses, there's very much a focus on how can we get this delivered as quickly as possible. And then it's like, Joe, let's get it delivered, and then let's patch things up afterwards.
Yeah,
and I think that's an issue that a lot of businesses face. And as you touched upon, often it's more costly than actually think about it from the front. Yeah.
And I get it. I run a business. We deliver projects all the time. Everybody's looking to be lean and agile and, deliver those projects early and well and to the satisfaction of our customers. But I think you've really got to focus on the costs of not doing this, that missed market, as we said, the risk of fines, brand reputation. You're not really furthering the industry if you're not bringing this into the process. So, you're not really working in an innovative way, I don't think, if you're not bringing in new ways of doing things for more people. And actually, this is where, I said earlier, it's not malicious, but I think if people knowingly make the choice to discard accessibility from their backlogs, to decide that it's not important, then I think they probably deserve what's coming to them in terms of loss of market share and compliance risk. I think it's the ones who aren't aware and the ones who would do better if they could are the ones that we want to encourage a bit of a culture shift in.
Okay, so we've touched upon fines a couple of times. Obviously, there have been some more laws that have been passed in the last few years, and most recently the European Accessibility Act, which we spoke about right at the start. Let's quickly talk about this specifically, because this was passed this year.
Yeah, so it's been in train for a number of years. I think it went live in June this year, June 2025. So it's aiming to pull together all of the different standards and laws that have been running in the different European member states. It builds on WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. It does apply if you're outside of the EU. That was the first thing a number of people did was, oh, well, we're in the UK and it doesn't matter because we're not in the EU anymore. But it refers to anybody who is supplying to the EU. So if you were selling to or shipping to, or you have logistic partners who are delivering for you in the EU, then you're in scope for this. we always try and say that, like, and I didn't come up with this, and I can never attribute it to the right person, but compliance is the floor, not the ceiling. Yeah. So if you only look at this from what's the minimum I need to do so I don't get fined, not really where you need people to be at. There's a huge opportunity to build brilliant products and services. It's quite broad in scope, so it looks at computers, the operating systems that underpin them. It's looking at smartphones, telecommunications, communication devices, TV and broadcast. It's looking at kiosks, card machines, any kind of screens that you need to interact with in order to pay, banking, website, mobile, commerce. It's quite broad.
Very broad, yeah, very broad. If I'm listening to that now and I'm thinking, okay, where do I start? Because that's massive. That's pretty much every touch point you have with a customer.
Tickets, e-readers. It's even looking at things like emergency services and telephony around that. So it's not something that you can really escape, but nor should you. We could see this as a game changer in the industry. So the downside of that is because it is broad, it's become a little open to interpretation. There's some exemptions in there. So from June 2025, if you're developing new products and services that fit in the categories that I just listed, they have to be compliant. For products that existed before that deadline, you've got up to 2030 to make them compliant. Now, if you're upgrading them, if you're updating your hardware or you're changing your devices, you need to do it then, but you've got another 5 years to make sure that you kind of fall within the scope. Small companies, like really tiny companies, micro businesses, if you've got fewer than 10 employees or you're a startup of that sort, you're exempt.
Okay.
People will use something called disproportionate burden. It's been a thing that has been used in accessibility and under the Equality Act, where they can argue the case that the cost of making the changes in their business outweigh the benefits or the financial gains that people would make from being able to use their product or service. So it allows them to argue that it's not worth it because nobody's going to gain more than it's going to cost us. So they tend to put in things like workarounds. It's a way to duck it.
It's a big grey area, right?
Yeah, it is. And there's also some confusion still around who is ultimately responsible. So where things tend to break is I could have a brilliant shopping experience on a wonderful, accessible website. But then the shipping might be done by a third party for that product. So the logistics tracking app might be done by another third party. I might get the product and decide I don't like it. The returns might be done by another third party. The after sales call team might be outsourced. There are multiple points where stuff can fail in a full customer journey, and it's a little tricky to work out who is ultimately responsible for that service fail. I think when you look at e-commerce sites within the scope, I think it's from the purpose of from the point of purchasing to transacting, and then you've bought your product. But what happens in all of those stages that follow? Disabled people might not be able to get physically to a store, to an InPost store, to return a product within a window before that window closes, and they run the risk of having to keep the product. Things like that are creeping in. That's making people wonder, well, where and where does the responsibility lie for that?
And surely that would sit with the retail brand that has only offered that one option of return, right?
Yeah, because you go to them and you've spent your money with them, and they're ultimately offering you a service. So it's beyond the product; it's the whole kind of service experience. And I think that's where people are more likely to come unstuck, and where you might see a little bit of finger pointing around, well, we were right, everything worked on our website. It was them. So
yeah, okay.
It's going to be interesting, but the law hasn't been tested. It only went live really in June. I believe complaints have been lodged, though. I think some people have started to use the act. And the other complexity is because it's across Europe, it's the individual member states, their own legal systems that kick in and take on the lawsuit. Yeah, so they do the cases. So fines will vary and the process will vary depending on where you lodge your complaint.
Okay. It'll be interesting to see how they develop then over the next few months, maybe longer. I can't imagine it's going to be a straightforward process when it comes to logging a complaint and then the process that follows afterwards. But I guess if we do see a few relatively hefty fines, and it will certainly be an area that I think a lot of businesses will look into with a bit more urgency.
Yeah, and I think they get a kind of first stage fine, and then they come at you again, and then they're
Okay.
it is that kind of brand reputation thing alongside it, as I said earlier, that, you know, if people know that you're under the scrutiny because you're cutting people from your service, are they going to, you know, morally choose to shop? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see how fast it happens.
Yeah, well, and it's one when I sit here thinking about it now, it's probably a tough one because yes, there's a lot of steps that companies can take to become more accessible, but it probably is very hard to include everyone. There's so many disabilities out there, and also we're making assumptions that everyone with a certain disability sees and acts in a similar way. There could be two people with the same disability that approach a situation in a different way. As such, they have a different experience, which then makes let's take a retail brand trying to make their website accessible for everybody, very, very tough. So it is a bit of a minefield, right?
It is, but I think what we're talking about is a kind of sea change in cultural attitude towards it. So if you can demonstrate that you're trying, you can show and be transparent around what you have done. The government digital services, one of the things that they have under their PS bar regulations, they have this thing called an accessibility statement. So if you go into a government website, you will be able to click on a link that says accessibility statement, and it will tell you exactly what they've done, what they've still got planned, where they know that the site fails, what you might do as a workaround, and who to contact if you need more help. So I'm kind of paraphrasing what one looks
Yeah,
like.
yeah,
But I would love all sites to have something like that. You know, if we can open up the conversation and they can say it's going to work for you in these circumstances, but unfortunately, if you have these particular needs, or this is how you need to interact with us, you might have to do these things instead. Let's just, you know, admit that it's hard to get it right in every situation, but at least show willing, at least show where you're trying to help. I mean, I'd love the private sector to take up that accessibility statement and just be a bit more open with what they're doing. Because you're right. I mean, I have a wonderful colleague, a really good friend, Molly. She won't mind me sharing this because she's a big advocate for accessibility. She has Usher syndrome, which means she's deafblind. She's registered as both. So she fits neither category of blind and deaf, and she spans both at the same time. So she completely subverts the whole model of, well, if you're blind, you're a screen reader user, and this is how you interact with a website. She doesn't, because she has 5 degrees of vision left. So she uses pinch and zoom just like I do. So there are shades of grey everywhere. You've got to involve people in the process to understand those. If you just put them in boxes and just do a checklist approach to accessibility, you're probably not going to fare that well. And as I say, that's kind of compliance driven rather than how can I go out and really understand my audience and how they're interacting with the service.
Okay. So I'm going to put you on the spot here. If you had to give an estimate of the amount of companies that box tick this versus the amount of ones that genuinely care about this, what percentage would you say?
I would say for the demand that we get when people make inquiries about accessibility, the vast majority of them are to audit a thing that's already been built. So I couldn't put a number on it, but I would say most people come to us when they've already built a thing and they want to do the rubber stamping of an audit.
Okay.
They want us to tell them that it's okay. Now that's all right because at least it's a step, it's an action.
Yeah, yeah.
But I would much prefer more inquiries around training, co-design, prototype testing, you know, working with people when they're buying a product, you know, commissioning, procurement, working with it at that stage so that what comes in to an organization or a brand is tested early and is assessed early rather than as a kind of, can you just tell me we haven't failed approach. So yeah, I think, and even the government digital services, even though they insist on audits and testing, they still allow people, you know, to get quite far down the line. And there's different maturity levels in all teams around when to test and how to do the testing and when to involve people. So yeah, I can't put a number on that, James, but I would say it's skewed towards trying to fix things at the end rather than get it right at the start.
Okay. And I guess that's going back down to an educational thing, right? And actually, we can educate more people around the importance behind it and the fact that actually making these changes at the start of the process is going to be far more beneficial for you and for your customers of no matter who they are,
Yeah.
then actually that's the best way to move forward rather than doing 80% of whatever it is that you're doing and then just saying, can you give me a
fix
stamp
it?
of approval? Yeah.
Yeah, and people who do that and then take the risk of the fines, it's like, why would you want to be that human? I think, it's a really work. We've not really talked about that aspect of it, but we all live in and around a world that has disabled people, friends, family, colleagues, people in school. Like, why don't we want to heighten? We want to raise that awareness, don't we? Why would we not? So it is really rewarding when you can understand perspectives that are different from your own, and you can kind of park your own privilege and say, actually, I want to help, and I want to understand, and I want to let them help make this thing better.
Yeah. Okay. And then just to be clear, the Accessibility Act, that's not just aligned to retail, right? It's aligned to every industry. Is that correct?
Yeah. So it's, the public sector was already ahead, as I said anyway, but it's looking at transport, travel, retail, commerce, accommodation, hospitality, anywhere where you can have those kind of interactions, websites, buy tickets, collect tickets, attend a thing. It's all of that as well. And
yeah.
just on that, physical accessibility has been a little further ahead because of things like the Equality Act and the ADA in the US. They sort of led with physical access first. So can you get into a place? Are you made welcome? Are the staff trained? Can they cater to your needs? Does the hotel room suit what adaptations that you need to in order to stay there? So I think online is playing catch up a little bit with that. And I'm seeing that in retail as well. So, yeah, I think when you look at in-store experiences, they're a little further ahead, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, things like shopping hours, quiet shopping hours for people who might benefit from that. So, neurodiversity and autism, ADHD, people who would prefer to be in a store at a quieter time without music and lights, temperature changes. So quite a lot of the big supermarket chains have done that. Adaptive clothing, Primark and Asda have just launched their adaptive clothing ranges with really good inclusive labelling. And by adaptive clothing, I'm talking about people with mobility issues, people who might be wheelchair users, people who might wear stomas. Like they've thought about that. They're using disabled models, real people, showing how they can kind of shop just like everybody else and enjoy these ranges. Yeah, we're seeing quite a lot of that. I mean, you probably know about the sunflower lanyard that people can wear. So when people are traveling or going to events, if they wear a sunflower lanyard, it indicates to service staff, customer experience teams that they've got hidden disabilities and they might need some assistance, or they might be happy to be approached to discuss if they've got physical access needs. So we're finding that a lot of that is happening in physical environments.
Okay, so just quickly, I wasn't aware of the sunflower lanyard, so that's really interesting. And then I guess that leads me on to a big question then. So the point you mentioned at the start there was the in-store certain shopping hours for people with certain disabilities. Until the first time we spoke, I had never heard of that before. Now the sunflower lanyards. Now, granted, I guess these wouldn't apply to me. I don't need to wear that lanyard, and also I don't need to shop at a certain time. But how can we educate the wider public on these things? Because there is probably a lot that happens that no one is aware of. And to me, there's a big gap there. We should all be aware of initiatives that companies are undertaking to improve their experience across their customer base.
Yeah, I think this is where kind of accessibility and inclusion needs to be a bit more mainstream than it is. So I know at Tesco, Asda, Lidl, they all have and have had for a number of years quiet shopping hours. I said some of the other brands, Primark, Asda, they've got their adaptive clothing ranges. Sainsbury's, big employer, employment opportunity provider for disabled people. So, we'll have disabled people working in store, just to kind of show diversity in real life a bit more now. Like, yeah, you're quite right. Some people, if it doesn't impact your life, why would you know? Why would you have to care about this? But you're never far away from it yourself. And I don't always like the whole, well, I could break my leg and then I'm disabled, because I'm not. That does not in any way kind of emulate the lifelong struggle of a disabled person. It gives you an indication of how hard it is to get around. So Microsoft have been quite good at talking about that kind of situational impairment, that we might all have an injury, an illness. We're all aging. That's a fact of life. And as we age, our interaction with technology will change. Like, it's a myth that all older users can't use mobile or can't use technology. That's rubbish. Many of them were founders of that technology. Likewise, it's a myth that all young people are digital natives, because, a lot of people are excluded for financial affordability, poverty, confidence reasons. But it is a fact that as we age, our interaction with technology will change. You'll up your font size on your phone. Yeah, you'll use pinch and zoom on captions. You'll use captions when you're on a train. You don't want to have any kind of background noise. It might just be easy to watch the TV at night with subtitles on, so that you can read as well as hear. So we're all getting there. We're all going to be using some of these features of accessibility without realizing where they came from. So we need to talk about that a bit more. As I said earlier, most of those things that we do with and for disabled people, and that they do for us in the design process, will benefit you. As a given, they will make things better for the majority.
Yes, it's certainly something I think we should be discussing more. Like you said, I'm not sure why it's not being discussed more, but I like to think the majority of humans out there want to do good, and they do care, and they want to help. So, I mean, firstly, it's great that there are these initiatives that are happening that many of us probably aren't aware of, but I do think it needs to be discussed more. The more things are discussed, the more collaboration there is, and ultimately, the further they then improve.
Yeah, and some of it's quite simple as well. We sometimes worry about it being this big bad cost or this big bad legal risk. Some of it's just like common sense. So things like color contrast, being able to read something easy because the contrast has been made, it's been set to the right kind of accessibility level, so that text over images, you can read them. Alt text on images, that's quite common now. 5-6 years ago it wasn't. You couldn't do that on all social media platforms, but now if you post an image on Blue Sky, or the bad place, I'll call it, but if you post an image, it has an alt text option where you can add a descriptor of what you've posted. That's become more commonplace, and that means somebody who is interacting with your content as a screen reader user can tell what that image is conveying. Yeah, so those aren't expensive things to do. They're enabled by default. Most products now, Microsoft products, as I say, you can switch on accessibility checkers on Word, on PowerPoint, on Excel, to make things that you're sharing and sending by email, whatever. You can do this now. It's not an added cost. It's more of an awareness. It just needs a little bit more thought in some cases.
Yeah. Okay. So a lot of the conversations have been focused around retail, and I guess that's where our audience predominantly is. So rightly so. We've touched upon a bit about online and a bit about in store. If we just drill down in a couple of key areas that we can take away some real actionable insights here. So where would you say, if you look online on a general B2C e-commerce website within retail, what are the top two? Where are the top two areas where there's gaps, which companies can address relatively quickly and easily and cost effectively?
Yeah, so big thing on commerce sites, on brand sites, people with a product catalogue, will be things like I've just mentioned. So color contrast, video captions, missing alt text on images, so that people can get a good description of that content if their mode of interaction isn't visual. So if they can't see a thing, we need to come up with smart ways of describing that thing so that they can also become a customer. That isn't hard. It's in all modern content management systems, product information management systems. It all allows you to put in those other descriptions. It might be an audio description. Video should have captions. Google does that for you. by default does it quite well now. Again, it didn't 10 years ago, but it's pretty good now. There's all kinds of AI tools out there that are enabling those transcripts to be accurate and fast, to change languages. So those kind of things could be done on every homepage. Forms tend to be where people fail. So where you actually go to input some information. Imagine if you can't do that by typing, you need to do that by voice. Or imagine if you can't see, you need to do it by keyboard only. Those forms tend not to work for people. And that's an easy one to embed in the most junior developer. If you show them how to do it once, they'll be able to do it again. You build that into your design library. That's fine. I mean, we saw some examples in health. We do a bit of work in the health sector where GPs were recommending post-COVID that you use a particular app to book appointments and do online consultations. People with screen readers couldn't even put their first name in the form because it didn't work. It hadn't been tested. Private sector apps sold into the healthcare industry. And you see those kind of form-based problems in commerce and on websites. Aftercare, really important. So if something does break, that's human. How easy is it for people to get to you? And you'll know from experience, how hard is it? Like, terms and conditions are really, really small.
And long.
When you don't want to be contacted, it can be quite hard to return a thing or cancel a payment, can't it? Because that's not where the money flows. So those kind of things are usually kind of degraded in the design. So you prioritize that kind of content. If there's a way that people need help that isn't enabled by your website, make it easy for them to get to you. Again, it's not a cost. It's just a human act. Those kind of things are fairly easy. I think don't put a lot of, I'm getting a bit more technical now, but a lot of heavy front end loading into your mobile experience places a bit of pain on some users, depending on how they've configured their mobile devices to work with sites. So really heavy kind of JavaScript stuff that costs data, stuff that makes it hard for people to get right at what they need to see. Pop-ups, a nightmare. Get pop-ups out of the way on all news sites and all shopping, so that people, if they are zooming in, it's not crowded for them. They're not going to inadvertently click on something that they shouldn't. Bad design practices or manipulative design practices where people try and upsell or load more things into your basket, which we all fall foul of. Was like the kind of UX stuff that we don't want to see, where people are or putting pressure on you to buy more or to pay more quickly. That's worse for disabled people. That's going to put an added level of stress on them. They might miss things in the small print. They might miss things that are grayed out deliberately because the brand doesn't want you to see it. So if we can just eradicate all of those sharp practices, that's going to help us all, but it's going to have an even more larger benefit for disabled users.
I'll tell you what, I had an experience of that recently, actually, booking flights with one of the main low-cost airlines. And obviously it's really, really easy to book the seat, but then there must have been at least 5 or 6 pages that popped up asking me if I was sure I didn't want any luggage extra, and then paying for the seat and then picking where I wanted to sit. Then again, it came up about the baggage and the sizes, and I'm like, look, I'm good. I don't need this. But even I found that stressful and complicated.
Spending is stressful these days. Committing to a big family purchase is expensive. If you've got cognitive condition, that means you're already under kind of cognitive load when you go to that site, and then they load all that in. There's no way to get it out of the way, no way to turn it off, or there's a clock ticking, a counter telling you that your price is going to go. People will make mistakes. It's designed for us to do that. And then you've got the added issue of, if they have got it wrong, who do they talk to? Chatbots aren't always accessible. More and more they're automated these days, so you can't have a kind of human style interaction. I actually know a lot of dyslexic users who prefer chatbots when they're built well, but the kind of version that just gives you standard answers, they're just stressful. And then if you lose a bag and you're visually impaired, what happens? The number of friends that I have who are wheelchair users who lose their wheelchairs, baggage handling loses their wheelchairs. I'm not going to name any brands, but it's really common. The number of people who book trains and book assistance, and the assistance doesn't turn up because they're off sick and there was only one person scheduled to turn up with a ramp. it breaks in multiple points, and that's awful for people. People get stranded.
I mean, losing a wheelchair is possibly one of the worst scenarios that can happen for someone that requires a wheelchair to get around.
Honestly, the anecdotes that get shared, it's not just lost wheelchairs, it's a lot of damage to wheelchairs, or willful kind of callousness with something that is a very, very important part of people's lives.
Yeah, well, we've seen how suitcases get chucked about and prams. You would kind of assume that wouldn't happen with a wheelchair, but maybe that's an assumption that I shouldn't be making, right? You know what they say about it. So
it's hard because of the lack of investment in general. Then obviously that's mirrored in customer service teams, in assistance teams. So again, my friend Molly, she's going to kill me for keep mentioning her, but she's wonderful. She has a repeated problem that she'll book assistance and they'll turn up with a wheelchair. She doesn't need a wheelchair. She's deafblind, but the go-to response is, get Molly a wheelchair. I mean, on the flip side, I have another colleague, and he won't mind me sharing this. He is deaf, he wears hearing aids, and he was trying to get the train to our office the other day, and he inadvertently got on the wrong train because it was a crowded platform and it was busy, and he didn't pick up the noise of the announcement, or the train times got slightly out of sync, as they do, and he got on the wrong train, and it was the fast train to London, so it's the one that doesn't stop. That could have been disastrous. He's got a disabled person's rail card, but he was obviously stressed and he was worried about not coming to work, and he was sending messages to us all. But the train manager, absolutely wonderful, wrote out a full diary event for his colleague who was getting up the next stop, and made sure that he got the next train back up free of charge without any kind of disruption. So when people have an awareness and people care and they know what the process is, you can have really positive experiences. But overwhelmingly, if you Google disabled people shopping, traveling, transport experiences, you'll read a lot of anecdotes where things just go wrong.
And it's nice to hear a positive story as we near the end of the episode. So it's always good to hear.
I should probably name check them. I did mention we are doing some research right now called The Hidden Journey, and it looks at exactly this kind of thing. And I will make sure that we put the positive examples in there, because we want to win over hearts and minds, right? We want to encourage that kind of transparency and culture shift in the industry.
Definitely, and it's really important we don't just talk about the negative experiences as well, because yes, there's plenty of them. Sure, there's far more than we can even imagine, but actually there is an awful lot of positive experiences as well, and we've got to talk about them. We've got to shout about them, because positivity breeds positivity.
Absolutely, it's where people learn from. So all of those examples that I've shared around, the brands that are doing this well in the physical space, the organisations that do respond to challenges, the grassroots community that cares about this stuff. There's loads of people that you can learn from.
Exactly, and it's about raising the bar. The more we talk about it, the higher the bar gets set, the standards increase, and actually, as a brand or business, you have to then move that level and then increase it. So, okay, right. Before we wrap things up, then, if you were advising a retail brand C-suite tomorrow, what is the one thing that you would suggest they do first when it comes to accessibility?
I would, ironically, even what I said before about fixing things after, I would do some kind of baseline assessment. I would be honest with yourself about where you're up to. That includes talking to your teams. It includes looking at what's already out there. It includes looking at your customer feedback. It includes looking at whether you've had complaints of this nature before, and just doing a really honest, where am I up to? Because everybody is at different stages, and you might find you're better than some, and that might give you the confidence to push to the next level. There is a thing around the simple things. If you can just educate your teams in the simple things. We have this thing called Fix the Six. It's the 6 most common issues. None of them are expensive. So if you just do some education around, if you just do these things, you'll see an improvement in the accessibility without, doing the bigger things around employing people, changing processes, and, really getting it right. People are at different stages. So, show them what good looks like at the next level, let them know where they are, and then kind of help them on their way.
The Fix the Six you just mentioned, is that something that's like unique to Nexer Digital?
No, it's a global thing called WebAIM. They do an annual report, and the annual report looks at the top can't remember, whatever the top most used websites are. It's like 50 websites, and it ranks them according to how many errors they have on their homepage. And the number of websites from major brands that, you'd be shocked, but it basically says, and these are the 6 most common issues, and that's the 6 that we talk about. We've kind of lifted those 6 most common issues to do this Fix the 6 awareness.
Okay. I'm wondering if that's something that we can promote alongside the podcast when we release it.
You've been very kind to let me ramble on about all of this. I'd be very happy if you could share anything, but there's some good stats from many other organizations that I'll send over your way as well.
That'd be really cool. It's obviously one thing to talk about it, and obviously the podcast, this recording in particular, has been very eye-opening for me, and I imagine for many others as well. And if there's sort of collateral that we can share alongside it for those that are interested and how they can fix those issues or address and fix those issues, and it's only going to benefit them, right? So I think that could be really cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's been wonderful that you've given us a bit of a platform to talk about some of our own work, but obviously what I'm trying to do is talk about the kind of wider community that are pushing this. So yeah, really, really, really appreciate it. Actually, it's not a common ask. It's, people tend not to talk about this stuff because they're frightened about getting sued. So
yeah, well, for me, I found it really interesting. As I said at the start, it's an area that I've been very naive to, and I'm not afraid to admit it. I'm sure I'm not alone. So it's really beneficial and interesting to talk about a different topic on the podcast, one that is super relevant to the space in which we all work in and possibly overlooked. I think what's really clear is that there are a lot of initiatives that go on behind the scenes that many of us aren't aware of, that we've discussed, but it's also really clear that there's still a lot that needs to be done, and a lot that can be done at not much extra cost. So I think that's a perfect place to wrap this up.
Right, thank you very much for your chat. It's really good.
Thank you for joining me. It's been really interesting. I've loved the conversation, and I love the couple of chats we've had before this, Hilary, as we've kind of narrowed down on the topics that we're going to discuss today. So thank you for joining me and for bringing all of the insights that you brought onto the show. And I hope for those that have been listening today, you found it equally as interesting. For anyone that's got any questions about anything that's accessibility related, I'm sure Hilary would be very open to talking through anything with you. We'll share a LinkedIn after this as well, so you reach out to her and discuss anything you want. But it's certainly an important area, and one that is clear that we shouldn't be overlooking.
All right. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Yes. And I'll see you all next time.